In other news now, the charity project is part of GlobalGiving, a non-profit organization that connects donors with grassroots projects around the world, and they raise funds for international and domestic sustainable development projects. Now, they're also philanthropic public projects that empower and help those in need. But joining me in studio tonight is the founder and CEO of the charity project, Mark Chunga. He's also an Afro-Australian therapist who's involved with a Soweto youth group. Thank you so much for your time, Mark, and welcome.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Let's start with the work that you do overall. I mean, what got you into philanthropic work and more charity work?
I think I became a product of a man who walked from Malawi to Zimbabwe, and with that, what he taught his children, and he engraved love and giving, and that got me into that, because me being a product of that is my parents then turned into someone that everything in your life you have to be giving and be helping to someone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's more of your purpose. And understand that with that purpose, you have 6 pillars which you apply to the work that you do, your projects, and as well as your organizations. Take me through that.
Yep. So basically, the first pillar, I think, when you fight an enemy, you need to know the type of enemy that you're fighting. So we have to create awareness so that people need to know that whatever that we're dealing with is really like mental health. So from awareness, then we move on to, okay, now we know, the masses know what the problem is. We get to the next stage, which is, and which got to the stage because of the sad truth, we realized that, especially in South Africa, most of the mentally challenged or mentally disabled people, they've never been diagnosed. So we had to have diagnosis. That becomes the second pillar. And then from diagnosis, we got to the third one. So when someone is diagnosed, at least now, the partners we have, we connect them to say, okay, this is what this person's problem is. We create care plans. And then from a care plan, what a care plan does now is everyone around, even the families, even the community, even society, now we know how to deal with the problem. And then when we put the makers together, then we get to the next one. So from the care plan now, we've looked at and say to ourselves, we have to create, are they going to have medication? Do they need aids? When they get those, whichever way we take them with the path with the person, that will be the next one. And from there, we then said, you know what, for a person to live their own fulfilled life, there has to be a community outreach to see the world that has been deprived from them. So then we put on the communities, we partner as well with social soccer teams, social club, even businesses that then say, okay, they're going to go have an outing, they're going to go and watch a soccer game, they're going to go to the zoo, really, watch animals, which then gives someone who's mentally challenged growth in your own mind that, oh, this is life that's possible. And from then on, the last pillar then becomes self-sustainability, which means now you have seen the world, you've got the world, and now what is in me that I have to bring out so that I can be part of a society or part of helpful to my family or the world, rather.
Absolutely. And I want to go back to one of your pillars, and that is of diagnosis. Unfortunately, we also live in communities which diagnose, and not necessarily professionally or scientifically, but there's stigma. There's a diagnosis called stigma in communities where when we see one with a mental challenge or illness, they're made fun of, they're prejudiced against, they're sort of isolated from the community. What informs that stigma, and how do you think we can address that, especially in our communities?
I think as you go back, so to deal with the second pillar, like I said before, we need to know our enemy. So to deal with an enemy, let's all now be aware, which is the first pillar. If we educate, and we at the Charity Project, we've introduced different programs where we even have meetings now with the families to involve them, so that when they know what's affecting the child, it's not some story they had from the neighbor or what we're thinking it is. Now we give them professional advice that says, when this person is, this is what it is. So for us to deal with the stigma in the society, we need to break the cycle. What's our cycle? Surprising numbers. Post-traumatic stress disorders. Dad comes home, he's angry. That affects the children. He beats up mom, it affects the children. I'm going to say something to a child that's going to affect how they view themselves. So every time as we go for diagnosis, to get away from the diagnosis, which is not a professional diagnosis, we need to educate the masses. And how do we do this? We're creating events. Those events, at least people can be educated. And we've got social media as well, and we doing our very best to
Right.
push it on social media so that we can talk about it. It has to be a conversation that people talk
Yeah,
about.
it has to be a normal conversation, not a taboo one. And also, my other concern is our family dynamics. You mentioned the father who's perhaps struggling with trauma or, anxiety or work challenges. You have a mother perhaps who's not used to opening up, is probably socialized to being submissive and not questioning within the household. How do we then make mental health a normal conversation within households, especially from parents who were previously sort of like inferior due to our political structures, told not to question, told not to seek, help, not encouraged to seek help. And then you see that generational cycle sort of spiraling out of control and then, sort of the children inheriting it. How do we then start that conversation at home, do you think?
I think to start a conversation at home, let's do this. Let's break a cycle. How do we break a cycle? If we look at what we're doing daily as a people, we need to address ourselves first. We need to learn how to breathe, to sit down, to be grounded. What's around us? What do my actions have for the person next to me? If we start on that part, then we move on now to say, let's take limits off. Let's stop pigeonholing ourselves. This is a wife's duties. This is a man's duties. This is a child's duties. No, there's nothing like that. We're all human beings. We need equal grounds. And we start operating on equal grounds. What that does for us is all the limits are taken off.
Yeah.
And without limits, well, the world is an oyster. Anybody
Absolutely.
can do whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you say this so passionately because I know that you also work with young people.
Yes.
And you'll be working with other young people in South Africa and various communities. Take me through some of the projects that you have in place. You also mentioned events that you have planned. Take me through that.
So what we want to do is we want to do what we call a 25 for 5 run. So like a full-on marathon, but we're trying to run 25 kilometers so that we can, for every kilometer that we run, we raise $5,000. So with that $5,000, at least now we're going to create for the children that are diagnosed. It's so important people get diagnosed.
Yeah.
When they get diagnosed, it then gives us, or even the professionals, how to handle. Parents are going through a lot. Because when I went to Soweto, we've seen the most scariest things, where out of 16 children, one was diagnosed. That's a scary figure.
Yeah.
So it means, so even the teachers who are dealing with the child, they don't know how to deal with this child. What does that do? It affects the whole family, because now what happens is the mother's already struggling. She's got her own stresses. The father's coming home, his own stresses. And we've got a child now we don't know how to deal with. What that does now for us, we're just throwing things, hoping it's going to land.
Right.
So now with our events now, we're sitting down and say, we're going to have a charity gala. We're going to talk about it. We're going to try to do that in December. What that we do before we get that, even on our social media, we are not just, like if you look at our Instagram page.
Right.
We are posting something with a message that we hope and links so that people can go to our website, find information about social norms. Because every day as we go, it's scary enough, we're committing serious crimes against humanity.
Yeah, I think it's an important conversation, especially even for the parents to take note of, and the teachers, because when you say then parents don't know how to handle a child who's not diagnosed, and when teachers don't know how to handle a specific child who's not diagnosed, then they end up naming the child that, no, they are spoiled brat, they're just being naughty, they need to be disciplined or punished even. But when they are diagnosed, then we know how to address the problem. Take me through what lack of diagnosis in a child who may be suffering from a mental illness can do to their adult life, what consequences that bears for them in their adulthood.
What I want to do is I'll go back to the start. We need to learn to plant seeds, right? Something that my grandfather told me. When he came from Malawi, this man didn't know how to speak the language. He walked, but he had a vision. He planted a seed in his life that this is what I'm going to do for an ultimate goal, which then saved the next generation, which is us, his grandchildren. The education that he never has, I have it. What we have to do for our children, for the next generation, and that's how we're going to break the cycle, is we need to learn planting seeds. Diagnosis, yes, might be the biggest factor, but look at our neurotransmitters. We think ourselves into diseases, right? Child has to development stage of a child from 0 to 8 years. When we are supposed to be feeding the correct information to a child, where we're supposed to be loving, nurturing, and caring.
Yeah.
We have skipped that because now, we as adults, look at our situation. I've got my own stresses. What do I do? Am I raising my child? No, I'm not. My child is growing up. And what that does now for our society is, we've got issues where I say, I've got my own problems. We look for what I started referring to as high. This is a dangerous thing about a high. People are going to church. People are going to clubs. People are going to pubs. People are resorting to drugs. Limited highs so that we can get away from our reality.
Yeah.
But this is the thing about a high. What happens when it stops? And when it stops, we go back to the mental issues now we're creating.
Right.
And the neurotransmitters, this is what they do. They're going to give you the recollection of the information.
Yeah.
What are we doing? You've got 20,000 to 60,000 thoughts in a day. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
80% of those thoughts, they're the same.
And you talk about that, which is a valid point, because then we find, temporary highs, as you talk about, and in South Africa we have a big drug problem. It could be in the form of nyaupe, various drugs, cocaine, ecstasy, etc. I guess my question to you is, are you partnering with the relevant stakeholders, such as, your government departments, whether it's Department of Health, Social Development, to make sure that everyone in South Africa is covered, even those who cannot afford, expensive private healthcare, psychotherapy, or even psychology services, but at least your projects and your organizations have partnered with government subsidies so that these, multitudes that are suffering from those, addictions, trying to run away from the problems, can at least access the help that they need.
Yes. So if you go to the pillar where I was discussing the care plan, in our care plan, this is what we've done. We've looked at it, said, we've got universities that have got students that we have said, can we have your medical students volunteer at these places? Right?
Okay.
And then we take these volunteer hours as a service that even helps in their education. Because what that does for us is the health department has now, we have pointed a finger where this is mental health. We've got such and such of charities. Let's say in Soweto, they have 10 charities. We've got Soweto universities, right? If there's a Soweto university, we've got 20 kids. Then we've got now 10 medical students before we even get to the professionals. Now the medical students, as they're learning, they're now providing a service that we desperately need in a society. And from there we go to social development. They need, a grant doesn't change someone's life, I'm sorry to say. What changes is when now we put hands on, we need to start getting our hands dirty. When now we're looking at stigma, like how you said it. Society now doesn't have to diagnose people. When children get born in a hospital, we need to see what's happening. Is this child good enough? Let's keep records. Those records now, so that's what we're structuring in our care plan, so that we have proper records of such and such was born on this day. This is what we think was the problem. And we do follow-ups.
Right.
And that way, I think, if we can balance service hours from volunteers, professional volunteers, not just a volunteer, so that now we can have pinpoint and getting our hands dirty with social development, with the government, not just giving grants that, the 20 people, they're going to give them grants. No, let's get to the root of the issue where we're dealing with people on one-on-one basis and doing follow-ups.
Those are some of the stakeholders that you obviously, partnering with, or at least considering partnering with. But what about the donors? Those partners who are giving, funding to the organizations or even individuals, how do you then spend those funds?
What do we do as a supporting organization? Because what we do as the charity project, we are supporting charities to help them, give them a structure to say, if this is your situation, this is what you need. So for our donors now, we're saying to our donors, this is how your money is going to be spent. And these are the results. Because now we've got the impact programs. Even on the website, we had to be so open. We want to, even if we start putting our books, to put our books and say, the dollar that came in today, got this child diagnosed. The 20 cents that came yesterday, this is what it did. So that we are transparent and the impact is actually visible to the society that the child is going to save and the family.
Yeah.
And hopefully we do it for the whole country.
Yeah.
Yes.
You talk about that impact, and I wonder if you've received any feedback from some of the communities that you have impacted, that you have engaged with, perhaps even parents who said, listen, you have just opened up my eyes. I wasn't aware this was a problem. How is the feedback being from just some of the work that you have done through your organization?
We've done which was great. Got me a little bit emotional, but
yeah.
We spoke to Africa VUCA Foundation, which is in Soweto. So what we started doing, the parents didn't want to do it, to be honest. We asked them to say, you know what, we're going to have regular meetings monthly. Let's catch up. I want you to be there when your child is being taught. So what that opens up was, the feedback we got was positive, because now they understand the importance of them knowing the day-to-day basis of the child and how it's being taken care of. So that now we just don't have children that are growing up, but now they're raising them and nurturing in the best way that fits the child's needs. And so that's the impact we've been getting for the past few days.
And I mean, with that feedback then, and some of the, obviously the visions and goals that you have for the organization, take me through some of the plans that you have in the future. Let's say perhaps your long-term goals for the next 5 years. Where would you like to see the organization go?
I'm not more into where the organization is going. I'm more of, can we break the cycle? And we really want to create a better future. A better future where our neurons are balanced, where we don't look for highs, we look for solutions. These solutions are in our children. If we raise children the right way, to understand it's not okay to laugh at someone who's got a mental illness, to diagnose someone. I think the Bible puts it better, don't judge someone. Where now our children, the right side of the brains for our children is saying, no, this person is in pain, let me give them a hand. Are you okay? When I'm really asking you, are you okay?
Right.
That's our long-term vision. If we can have that 5-year plan where the next generation we're going to raise, they give each other a hand, and we're going to have these children who's going to represent our African countries, Special Olympics. I really want to have another Stephen Hawkins that comes from Soweto.
Yeah.
I don't want to restrict someone because they've got a mental illness. I want to have another Cher who's got dyslexia, who's going to be performing on stage. If we can have a generation like that in the next 5 years, that would be awesome. I think that's our really main vision.
Well, Mark Chunga, wish you all the best, and thank you so much for joining us.
No worries, thank you for coming.
All right, well, that's Mark Chunga joining us right here on Nightline. But when Nightline continues, the great white shark in False Bay is becoming a rare sight, and find out why when we come back.